right? And he has his other hand in your pocket. One hand here, one hand here. Okay, and he's got nuclear weapons pointed at you in both directions. And he controls 50% of all natural gas reserves in Europe and 40% of all petroleum. And he's sending nuclear missiles, nuclear material to Syria and Iran, both of whom want to kill you. You definitely want to make this guy very angry, because then he's going to do something really stupid, and you want to embarrass him in front of 1.5 billion people, right? In other words, sometimes good politics, a good political rhetoric is not smart international policy. And shutting up would have been far better, not angering Putin more. Now, God intervened, at least in this case, and put Putin back a step because their bourse collapsed. Their stock market collapsed temporarily. But he's really in the catbird seat. If I were a Pole or a Ukrainian today, I would be very, very nervous. Because Russia can walk right in there anytime they want. That is their history. It's the history of the Russian people. Going back to Peter the Great, depending upon how you define him, or Ivan the Terrible, whichever one you like. Of controlling as much land mass as possible and being very paranoid about it. So I think the Americans have disserved, because of our experience in Iraq, we've disserved those allies we were supposed to protect by treaty, and are going to be in a very difficult position to do so should the Russians have. Is it an issue in the election? It's only an issue because people love to have somebody they can cite as the enemy, i.e. it's either the populace standing up and going after Wall Street, which McCain's trying to grab part of, or the foreign policy people are concerned that going after Russia as a way to define their argument. But it's not necessarily good for us to talk as a nation to have that discussion right now, considering we can't figure out how to make the national debt payment, which is going to come due in a couple of months. Yeah.
Hey, Fred Weiss, an attorney in New York.
Hello, Fred Weiss, an attorney in New York.
Your familiar with Democratic politics is very impressive. What went wrong in the Hillary campaign? A lot's been written about it. A lot of bright people seem to run into each other. What would you have done differently, and do you think she should have been a more formidable candidate against McCain right now?
That's a loaded question. I want to try to be very fair. And I'm happy to answer it, and I will. I'll tell you my biases. You will find I'll tell you the truth as best as I can. That's, I guess, why reporters and others like me. I am a Clintonite. I was one of the authors of, as people follow politics now, I was one of the authors of the rhetoric in the second campaign, certainly, and that went into the administration on values. Let's see. Cutting Medicare, $270 billion. Cutting education, $170 billion. Cutting Medicare, $270 billion violates our duty to our parents. Cutting education, $170 billion violates our duty to provide opportunity for all. Cutting the environment hurts all of us. President Clinton's plan, I wrote it, and a lot of stuff like that. So, and I did the spots that were around that as part of the team with other folks. But so that's my biases, and I know her for 25 years or so. I worked for them the first time, worked for the Clintons the first time in Arkansas in the early 80s. So my biases are there. Do I think that do I think she was served well by the campaign? The answer is no. Do I think that the '96 campaign was rerun within that campaign? The answer is yes. Do I think they failed to understand the nature of virtual communities and the changes in the demography of the population that they could have gotten? The answer was yes. Was it a failure? Was it a strategic misfortune and stupidity not to compete in caucus states? The answer is yes. Do I regret not having participated? I told her I would not. The answer now is yes. Do I think she would have been far and away? Do I think this campaign would be very different was she the nominee? The answer is yes. Why? I think we'd be winning it by big numbers. Not that he's a bad candidate, but he was a terrific primary election candidate. He's not been a great general election candidate. That is different. And that is part of it is his own doing, and part of it is circumstance. But she would have been far and away would have been not a better candidate, but further ahead of the game. Why? Guys like me who grew up in the world I came from, and the people I talked about in the Midwest would have said, you know what? She'd get us working again. That's the difference. This is ultimately, in domestic politics, gets down to who works and how often. We think about how much money, in the East Coast and California, New York, how much money can I make this week? Come on. Average guy is worried about whether he can pay the mortgage. Here's the deal. He's not going to stop. Here's the problem politicians have, by the way, and this is part of what's going on in the Obama campaign, I think. Hillary is lightning rod, right, so she's much more emotional when she shows up. That's the bad news and the good news. Here's the other news. Here's the Obama problem. People are not going to stop having sex, going to the toilet, paying their mortgages, eating food, worrying about whether their children are going to get to school in the morning or to college or survive, and all the other things that are part of living until Barack Obama tells you what he's going to do with the economy. It's not going to happen. McCain, war hero. He's got something that holds people instantly. Because this is ultimately not about rationality, it's about the emotional moment. And rhetoric is not deed. That's Hanoi, being in Hanoi Hilton does not equal good rhetoric. Being lightning rod for both pro and con gets you in the game. What gets this tied down? That's the problem that Barack Obama's facing. It's an emotional connection issue. That may be racially tinged. I don't know enough. I haven't seen data yet. My instinct is it is. Yeah, someone else, please. Sir.
Oh, yeah, Gregory T. Angelo. I do. I'm communications director for John Kromzak. He's a candidate for New York State Senate.
Well, good luck to you.
District.
Wish you a lot of luck.
And also do press representation for Log Cabin Republicans.
Excellent. Well, congratulations to you. I think that's very important, and I salute you.
Great. Thanks. My question was, you had mentioned this group of 500,000 white Catholics that, and the fact that their influence on elections is about to evaporate.
It's the Kastner woman. Find it, Joe.
I wanted to know if you see after this election a new group emerging, or what will there be a new group of swing voters that then the candidates and their campaigns are going to have to focus on in order to win?
I am not sure how that's going to work out. Why I think this is the last time that the dynamic that's worked in '68 will work is because they shift in the economy. I see a Midwest that is going to be much more like Central and Upstate New York than it is like it is today. Devoid of jobs. The auto industry is not just jobs, but it's about a whole culture that is seriously in danger of being destroyed, which bears no good for this country. I mean, having 1 million of those guys out of work ain't a good thing. It's not a good thing, and that is not inconceivable. I mean, we're going to see job losses in this virtual economy. Paul Krugman wrote about this in the Age of Diminishing Expectations. What, 15 years ago? About this kind of economy that doesn't work, based upon debt and ridiculousness. We're going to see, real job losses. We're going to see that culture wiped out. So I don't know who replaces it. My worry is that some guy will come on a white horse as these parties continue to break down, and that's also what's happening ideologically. They're breaking down. If you want to see what happens when political parties break down in democracy, you only have to look to Venezuela. Okay, I was there. That's the last one. There are others. I can go through history. There are other democracies where parties are broken down, where you have ultimate chaos. In America, we had the parties break down in 1932. It's a function of great economic crisis. Essentially, we had a dictatorship for 16 years, 14 years until he died. Let's see, 13 years that he died. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. But it was a good dictatorship. Okay, it worked. But these are serious things when economic systems break down, when opportunity gets destroyed in democracy. It's not good. That's why participation becomes very important. Why? Because participation is the balance. When people tend to participate less, and when things get tough, even if it's violence, I don't care. If they're doing something, at least there's activity. Because democracy functions when there's noise. Democracy functions best when there's argument, when there's comment, when there's something going on, not in a quiet room. So who do I think replaced them? Not sure. Demographics and job movement will tell you. My instinct, see, the great news about the South is that poverty is higher than the rest of the country, therefore it's pretty consistent, That ain't going to change a lot. So who are the next group? Maybe could be in the East Coast, I don't know, I'm not sure. I just don't know. Some things I don't have the answer for. Yes, please.
Sheinkopf, Heather Robinson, I'm an independent journalist, we've met before.
That's right, you met me on the street.
Yes. I wondered what
It was great too, by the way, it was a great meeting.
Yes. I wondered, thank you, for me too. What do you make of Hillary's decision not to turn out for the anti-Ahmadinejad protest? Do you think it suggests there's a lack of commitment on the part of the Democrats to unity in the face of this threat? And do you think it could have a real impact in the election?
I think if you ask the people that I think will decide this election who Ahmadinejad is, they'd wonder whether it was a restaurant down the street. That's not real. And if you asked them where Iran was, they'd say, yeah, it's one of them over there. Okay, and they don't like us. Well, that they'll get because of the Iran hostage crisis. But do I think that Hillary's non-appearance has anything to do with a lack of commitment to fighting terrorism? After 9/11, you can't be opposed to fighting terrorism. What you can be opposed to is wars that don't accomplish that. It's a different issue. Do I think that the Democrats were successful? If there's a political outcome, let me back up. If there's a political outcome to be gained, or was gained from the Ahmadinejad, anti-Ahmadinejad rally and the failure of people to show up, I think the Republicans won that argument. Why? Because Sarah Palin being ejected was the major moment, not someone else showing up, or not showing up, number one. Number two, for the record, you know, not for you guys, but for the record, anybody here who's an influential, I think the treatment of Malcolm Hoenlein in this context has been abysmal and disgraceful. I think that he deserves, as a leader of the Jewish community, to be treated with a lot more respect, and that his extraordinary contributions be protected from right-wing and left-wing attack. But I think it was an unfortunate incident, and I don't think it shows anybody's commitment. I think it was all about politics on both sides. Said, why? Because the Republicans were just as upset about it. Hold a rally afterwards, make a statement, don't pout your way out the door and have her run around seeing diplomats the next day to show how much experience she had.